because I got a call last Friday, and Steve's like, "Do you think you could introduce David and Pat?" And I said, "Sure." And he's like, I thought he was in his car, and he said, "Now, you've known Pat a while, right?" I said, "Yeah, I think I have." First, I want to thank everybody for coming and introduce our family here on the right. Pat's mother and stepdad, Barry Stormer, over here, and my wife, Katie Meyer, it's a pleasure to introduce David and Pat. I'll make it very fast. I remember when David walked into the newsroom, I was trying to think of a sports analogy because of the Indians series that's coming up Thursday, and David walked into the newsroom in 1994, and he was, tell me if I'm right, David, he's sort of a combination of Lindor, and with the exuberance and excitement, and the edginess of Napoli, and craziness of kind of Trevor Bauer and Napoli. Anyway, David came in and he added something to the newsroom that was badly needed. We didn't even know it was needed at the time because he just could do anything and everything. And he was sort of another Jose Ramirez, hitting it clutch hitter, just great stories constantly. So I'm really thrilled that David is going to be talking to Patrick. And I have known Patrick for a long time, even before he was born, really. And it's a pleasure we got to spend some time today together, Pat and I, which is unusual because he's in Tennessee and he drove through town. It was a great Akron day. Drove through some of the neighborhoods where he used to live and took some pictures and had a lot of memories. Anyway, it's great for everybody to come. I'm very excited to hear Pat and David up at the podium. Thank you.
Hello. I'm thinking if I stand and he sits, we'll be about equal height. So.
I'm just going to snip into my time.
All right, well, thanks. My gosh, look at this. I was at the Theaster Gates Roundtable just a couple of weeks ago, which obviously you were there, and it was amazing. It was, it was a different roundtable. It was not the usual scripted speeches, as Dave referred to, but much more of a performance. And to me, and I think to a lot of people in that room, it felt like that set the tone for the next 40 years, or hopefully beyond, of what the roundtable can be for Akron, with this great basis in the community and a way to move forward. But I have to admit, I smiled slightly at the end of the program because Steve Schmidt previewed this program. He said David Giffels will be in conversation with his high school friend Patrick Carney, which A would mean either Patrick is 15 years older than he is, or I'm 15 years younger than I am, or B, that either I went to Firestone with Patrick or he went to St. B with me. But by the same token, like thinking about that today, I was thinking about the day I met you at. It was, you were still in high school at Firestone. I had just started at the Beacon Journal, and we had an internal newsletter at the time, a printed newsletter, an employee newsletter, and it had classified ads in the back. And there was an ad for a Tascam 4-track recorder, and I was still a musician, and it was cheap. And so I responded to the ad, and the ad had been placed by Jim Carney. And when I responded, he said, well, it's my son, Patrick's, so if you want to connect with him, you can do that. So I ended up meeting you at your mom's house, and I still have it. I bought it tonight. I paid $100 for it for cash money. But it made me think, like, you know, this changed hands. I never learned how to use it very well. In fact, I learned how to use it very poorly. But this this was kind of a stepping off point. Like, you had outgrown this little 4-track recorder. You were like already advancing.
Yeah, I think if you guys don't know what this is, it's basically, so when you have a cassette tape, you can record like a stereo album. This is for like musicians who want to teach themselves how to record. You actually can record on the front stereo channels and the back stereo channels at the same time. So if you want to record like your band, you can play like vocals, guitar, drums, keyboards. So my dad got me this for Christmas. I was spoiled. In 1993, I was 13. I was begging for one. I think they're like $140. But I learned to record on this thing, which is basically how Dan and I ended up becoming a band, because I sold that so I could buy a nicer one, a nicer 4-track. Because that one, you can only do 2 tracks at once. I wanted to. And Dan lived, my dad lived on Malvern, and Dan grew up on Letchworth, in West Akron, and our younger brothers, were best friends in high school and middle school. And one day my brother said, you should get together with Dan, who I knew from the neighborhood, from playing like flag football and trading baseball cards. But he ran in kind of a different circle because he played sports, and I can't even like ride a bike. But at the time it was unusual because I never took my younger brother's advice at the time, but I did. And I reached out, he said I should play music with Dan, and I reached out to Dan, and Dan brought his guitar down to my dad's house. And he was really good at guitar, like a lot better than me. And I had this drum set that I saved up from working at the Mustard Seed. I was washing dishes. I lied about my age and said I was 16 when I was 15, and worked like 40 hours a week at the Mustard Seed in Montrose. Anyway, I took all the money I made that summer and bought like a bass guitar, a drum set, a keyboard, and I already had a guitar, and I had a 4-track, thinking that my friends would come to my dad's house, and I would play guitar, and I would start a band with my friends. It didn't work out that way because I was so bad at guitar. But Dan was good, and Dan came over, and it was the first time I really played drums, was just because we wanted to make a recording on my 4-track. So he played guitar, and I played drums.
Wasn't a drummer supposed to show up that day and didn't show up?
Well, this is in high school.
Or was that part of the myth?
Well, this all took place in like 1997, 1998. And then we parted ways and didn't see each other. Or we'd play every like 6 months or something. And then around 2001, it was actually, I think right before September 11th, 2001, Dan had just dropped out of the University of Akron. And I had just basically been told by a professor that I was the worst at cutting things with a razor, so I couldn't really study art there. I had a very poor craftsmanship, she said, which I still can't wrap a present. I can't read music either. I can't sing. But anyway, I was kind of miserable, and I had just bought this new, I had upgraded from the 4-track to this new digital recorder, which I had got my first credit card and went into debt, and I was stressed out, really stressed out about it. It was $900. So Dan found out that I had it and wanted me to record a band of his called the Barn Burners that were playing gigs around the north side and a bunch of other college bars in Kent. And I hadn't seen Dan in a while, and I said, sure, because I also figured I could pay off some of this debt on this recorder. So I said, come over to my house. It was like September 3rd or something, 2001. I said, tell the guys your band. It was a drummer, a bass player, and I said, come over to my house, and we'll make a recording. So Dan showed up right on time, and we sat on my front porch and waited for an hour, and the other 2 guys just never showed up. So Dan was like, why don't we just go in the basement and record some songs ourselves? And so once again, I played drums and played guitar, and we recorded 5 or 6 songs. I then mixed it over the next few days, and like right September 11th happened, and I remember finishing the mix right after that, and we both really liked it. We decided that we would start a band. And then, so basically, if it weren't for that 4-track, I probably wouldn't have played music. Because I was a terrible drummer, by the way. I'm still not very good, but back then I was terrible. Like, it would be like, it's like, you know, me playing drums on those recordings is the equivalent of like having the guy selling hot dogs come pitch for the Indians. That's how we keep the Indians references up, because my dad's so stoked. And
Yeah.
stepdad, there.
Jim Carney, I think I represent the entire lineup of the 2016 party of David Napoli's tonight.
I feel like that, the way I worked that was kind of more like Jason Kidd was tell me he did.
Yeah, we could be work Bluebird, I guess, because I didn't that. So, yeah, so I remember, so that day, I remember we immediately started into a conversation about music, and this 4-track did not lead to the same musical career for me as it did for you. But I remember coming home, like walking away and thinking, that is the hippest 16-year-old I've ever met. Like, he knew everything about music, and we were talking about Akron music. Patrick's uncle, Ralph Carney, was in a seminal Akron new wave art rock band called Tim Huey, and went on to play with Tom Waits and a whole bunch of other really important artists, and he's made a career in music. And I remember thinking, this is a guy who's very young, who's steeped in this Akron music, and it really seems to like care about a legacy of Akron music, of Akron's new wave, of Devo and the Waitresses and Tim Huey and Chrissy Hind. And I wonder if you could talk about your introduction to that legacy, and also maybe where the Black Keys fit into that story.
Growing up, yeah, my uncle Ralph was in a band from Akron called Tim Huey, and I remember going over to my dad's parents' house. We spent the night there. You know, I felt like once a week or something. And well, we would do the same thing every Friday or whatever day it was. We would go into the rec room in the basement, and my grandmother would put on this Tim Huey album. And I remember hearing, like, that was the only record I ever heard, basically. Except for something like that. And that sort of.
And Tim Huey was not like your grandmother's music.
Well, I reckon their first song, the first song on the first side is a cover of a Monkees, well, Neil Diamond song, I'm a Believer. And anyway, so I recognize that song. For a long time I thought that they just recorded that song, like the hit version. But I remember looking at the Warner Brothers logo, you know, and like kind of recognizing it from Looney Tunes and kind of being fascinated. And then, you know, I kind of was sort of aware through my dad telling me about, you know, some of the other bands around that time. And I knew of Devo a little bit, but it wasn't really until, I guess I turned 13 or 14, and for my birthday, I think it might have been 13. When my dad got me this Devo CD that was called Devo Live at Max's Kansas City. And it was a live recording of them playing in New York before they put the record out on Warner Brothers. And I got obsessed with it. I just really got obsessed with it. And I became a huge Devo fan. And then through that, I became like really into like, you know, studying and kind of learning all the other Akron bands and how cool it was that the city that I lived in. It felt like there was like nothing happening musically, you know, that I could pick up on in 1993 or 4. There were like a couple bands that I wasn't really into, like Dink or something. Some of these bands that were getting signed. I don't really know anything about it, but I was obsessed. And so I was like nostalgic for this kind of era that I just felt like I just missed out on. And I felt like my friends and I should try to start bands, and it would be cool to try to replicate like that if we could get people to play music. And you know, I guess in that Devo Live book, there's a story about Devo driving from their apartment in Akron to play it's a famous club that existed in the 70s in New York called Max's Kansas City. So they go and they play the show. I think they get paid like a couple $100 maybe, which I think is a decent chunk of change for them. And Andy Warhol was at the show, David Bowie, and then they get right into the van and drive back to Akron, and their phone starts ringing. They start getting calls from major labels. And I always thought that was like kind of the most amazing story. And fast forward, that was like, you know, almost 9 years later, 10 years later, Dan and I could play our first show in New York, and Andy Warhol's not there. Iggy Pop is not there. David Bowie's not there. We drive all the way to Brooklyn and play this club called the Southpaw at like 8:30, and no one was there. We're opening for this really terrible band. No one was there. We get $50, and we realized it's only my second time in New York, but I knew we couldn't afford even the gas, you know. So we get right back to the van and drive straight back to Akron. And it wasn't the next day, but it was about a week, 2 weeks later, we started getting phone calls from Seymour Stein, the guy that started Sire Records, one of the same guys that was called Devo. And somehow, I don't know exactly, it's just one of those things that maybe, because I was so obsessed with that story, it worked out. I have no idea, but I've always seen parallels, you know, and like even to this point, we're on a record label called Nonesuch today, but it's a division, it's an imprint of Warner Brothers, and I swear it's because I always wanted to see that Warner Brothers logo. Swear to God. I mean, we had good offers from different labels, and it was like, gotta go where Devo went, or TNT went. But that's the kind of effect that Akron's music has had on me. It's basically, it's made me want to do what I do. It's also reading about all the watching my uncle, play music and, focus on the art more than the success. That's kind of always been like Dan and my Emma, We've always wanted to, do well, but on our own terms.
Well, one of the things I've always liked about the Devo story that they've embraced is their narrative of that same time when they were kind of starting to be courted by record companies and like big time executives, and being this sort of like having this self-awareness of the humility of coming from a place like Akron. Like when Devo talks about being courted by Island Records, which is based in Jamaica, and having Richard Branson flying from Jamaica into the middle of one of the worst winters in Akron in 1978 with no idea, he's in a Hawaiian shirt, and he's off the plane at Cleveland Airport, and he's like, they had to take him straight to a Kmart to buy a winter coat. And then vice versa, when they got flown to Jamaica to have meetings with Island, they got on the plane in their big mucklucks and parkas and got off the plane in Jamaica, and it's sunny here. This idea that that I think we still embrace, even though it's sort of in a winking way, that we're in the middle of nowhere, and that we recognize our smallness in the world, and that part of that is our strength and our sort of groundedness. And I've seen that in you and Dan, certainly. And I wonder if you could talk about what it is about being from Akron that's part of your personality, and what it is about being from Akron that's part of your sort of musical personality as a major worldwide rock star band.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Akron is my favorite city. It's my hometown. I don't know. I mean, I assume a lot of my obsession with the city is just merely because I was born here. But when you're born here and you're raised here, and you have Cleveland 35 miles, up Route 77, you're automatically an underdog, basically. And I think that underdog status, it's why. And I think, obviously we're a part of Cleveland in a lot of ways, especially sports team wise, and I think that's why, everybody loves LeBron so much, and I think that's why everybody, maybe not this year loves the Browns, but I think what happened when the Cavs won the championship last year, I swear to God, I almost didn't want it to happen. You know what I mean? And that's a very Akron thing. You definitely want it to happen, you're definitely excited, but part of you is what do we do? We aren't supposed to.
We're so good at almost winning.
What we don't have to do, we're supposed to come in second, always. I really don't think that's kind of
my theory was
we're used.
We're going to win the World Series and it's going to screw the whole thing up. It's now we're just beating.
I know, honestly, with everything going on politically and whatever, and if Indians win, we all might want to build a bomb shelter. unsettling to be victorious. That's just all I think together. And I know Dan and I gave me a really huge complex, honestly, that Dan and I might have made 600, 700 shows up till 2010, and in 2010 we had a record that came out called Brothers, and we were used to, this is our 6th album, so we were used to the kind of what happens when you put a record out. You put a record out, the first week it sells X amount, the second week it sells half of X amount, and so forth. You know what I mean? It just doesn't stay. And this time we put a record out and it did not do that. It sold X amount, then it sold half of X amount, and then it just stayed there. And it just kept selling records. And it basically wigged me out. Succeeding wigged me out, and it happened. I remember the day we were playing Lollapalooza in Chicago, a festival, a big festival. There was like 90,000, 80,000 people that attended, and this is our 4th or 5th time playing this festival. So the last time we played it, we were playing right in front of Paul McCartney, so it's not like we've just been playing in some shoebox at the festival. We were playing the main stage. We had the same time slot this time. The only difference was there were a lot more people watching us, and I felt like there was a lot more pressure, and I got stage fright for the first time. Because succeeding I'm allergic to it. I had to go to a hypnotist, I had to go to all kinds of crazy stuff just to figure out how to go do what I've done 700 times previous. And then the main thing, the only way that really got me through it is to look around and realize that, the expectation is all in my head, you know what I mean? I think that a lot of that, being scared of success, I think that's a very accurate thing sometimes, you know what I mean? To literally, it's a thing. I've seen it with a lot of my friends. I am by far, the least talented musician of my friends from Akron, Ohio. Straight up. The only difference is I wasn't afraid to get into a minivan and smell like urine and sweat for months. And I was willing to bet on myself. And Dan was too, Dan, was not the least talented musician I know from Akron. But together, we did create something very unique, and we also were willing to I would never say that we made a great record or anything, but I would say that we put in a great effort. But the part of that is you think it's never going to come around, and when it does, you lose your underdog status, and then you have to redefine yourself.
Musician friendly, yeah. So just for the record,
I don't think so.
But one thing that, along those lines, one thing that was interesting about seeing you and Dan get started is kind of right from the start, at a small level, your shows were already, you guys were already kind of a big band, from your first shows. And the big band, I mean, your friends came and their parents came. So there were 50 people that. So it's wow, this is a band that knows how to cut across audiences, because they're not just playing to hipster kids, or they're not just playing oldies for an older crowd. There was something about your music that had some sort of
there was a kind of perfect storm happening, because Dan had honed his craft playing to college frat kids,
right?
And he learned, and he was a great singer, and he had to learn to become a performer. I had done the opposite. I had played music in front of people who stared at the floor the whole time that you're playing. So our idea was to play kind of a mixture of both, but we focused it, the bars that our favorite bands played, rather than play Ray's and Ken or something.
Right. I think you know this, but a few years after we met, and I became a columnist at the Beacon Journal, I got an email, a very earnest, very professionally written email from Dan Auerbach saying, "Dear Mr. Giffels, I play blues in a band called the Barn Burners, and we play every week at the North Side, and I would like to invite you to be a standing member of the guest list to come and see one of our shows, so we can, sort of wow you with the whiz-bang blues rock that we're playing." He was so earnest and professional, and you were sort of the laid-back hipster. It was almost like you two were a perfect, he needed you to be cool, and you needed him to be musically good. and you both brought some things to the mix.
Yeah, we do.
I'm not,
The thing about Dan is we have this type of really bizarre relationship where, like I said, in high school, we know we were polar opposite, but we have so much in common. Like, there's a Venn diagram, there is a center that is very, but it's like the universe. We switch positions. Like, there are times when Dan's definitely the coolest guy, and I just am like, basically, you know, just look like an assistant sales manager at Kinko's or something. And it just switches, but we can never coexist at the same time. We have to be in our right spot. You know?
Where was, like, because you formed your local band, but you decided very early to sort of like get on the road and like really try this, you know, that so many musicians in so many big and small towns across America have done. It's, you know, it's kind of like one of the American stories. But with you, like, there was a kind of, where was, or can you say where there was the moment where you realized there's something here, it's just two guys in a band, which is really unusual, that is clicking, that we're like, we mean something together, and this is going somewhere beyond just trying to make this work?
Yeah, I mean, our careers, it's been, you know, it's like the tortoise wins the race type of deal. There's always been enough encouragement for us to never give up. You know what I mean? So early on, I guess one thing that happened would have been we got a Rolling Stone review early on that was 4 stars, which solidified, I think, for my grandfather and my dad that it was like a legitimate thing. And then, you know, we still weren't able to like really pay much more than our rent, like at all. But there's always been something, you know. But I think the first time that I really felt like we had made it, it was either when I saw in 2000 for our record Brothers, that was our first kind of really commercially successful record. It got nominated for some Grammys, and when I saw my brother was nominated for one because he does all of our artwork, my brother Michael. And you know, in the Grammys, they don't really, they give out like the art Grammy first. So we went to the pre-telecast, which is basically like them giving out Grammys in a toilet. And but the second one they gave out, my brother won it, and I was like, this is before Dan and I won anything, and I was like, this is real. A Grammy. And I was like, I never, it sounds kind of funny because no bands I like really have ever won a Grammy. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean, it literally means nothing to me, other than it, but it does. You know? It did. I was surprised, but it doesn't. You know? Or the year later we were on the cover of Rolling Stone, and that, for me, I think was for sure, I kind of just was like, I can't believe they put like at the time, a 32-year-old dork on the cover.
Justin Bieber? So,
I was talking about Dan, by the way, not
how much younger than him. So I know that there are questions coming in to this fancy device. I never even learned how to use a 4-track, so I'm going to try to use an iPad here. But while I start to call you, what's it like to be backstage at Grammys?
I mean, that's hard to answer because I've done it one time. We got asked to play the Grammys in 2013, and I still was struggling with stage fright like severely, and every single day, the month of January, I woke up at my house in Nashville. I literally was like, thank you, God, today's not the day. I ended up getting a prescription to beta blockers, which like stop your adrenaline glands from receiving adrenaline. And I was like driving around my car in Nashville, and I needed half one to see how I felt. And a buddy of mine was like, you can't rely on that stuff to like go perform, it's just a TV show. But anyway, to answer your question, I ended up going to the hypnotist, and it worked. I didn't take the the beta blocker, but Dan freaked out and needed it. And backstage, I don't remember much, although there were just a lot of people who I recognized who were talking to us as if we'd always been there. And I think Dan and I kind of had a chip on our shoulder where it was like, we've been a band for 11 years. This is our first time back here. And I was basically like, excuse me, give me the F out here.
It kind of makes you feel like you're grounded in
well, my night,
uplift, right?
I was gonna say my night then went from there to going back to the hotel, and then that night we had a little kind of reception or party for an hour with my brother and some other friends, and I walk out of the hotel to go to our after party. It's in LA, so it's early because the Grammys were at 8, so it's 9:30. And literally some dude jumps out of a bush with a camera and a light on it. And it's I didn't know what it was. It was TMZ, and they're just trying to pick off anybody that they kind of recognize. And I think just because I basically had glasses, I don't know, they easily recognize me. And they basically were like, what do you think about Justin Bieber not winning a Grammy? And literally I've never thought about it. Justin Bieber or the fact he doesn't have a Grammy, and I said something I'm glad that he's rich or something. He should be glad he's rich. I don't know, but anyway, the next day I woke up from that whole experience of playing the Grammys, being stressed out, being backstage, feeling uncomfortable, being in a parking lot, getting a camera put in my face, when I definitely no, I'm flying back home to my house in Nashville. I'm never gonna. This is that world. I don't live in that world. I definitely, I'm an Akronite. You know what I mean? To and through, I had nothing to do with that. And I'm driving to the airport, and I got tweeted by Justin Bieber saying, he wanted to slap me in the face. Keep in mind, I'm hungover, very hungover. And I'm furious as well. I'm like, wait, isn't this the guy that is the anti-bullying spokesman? So confused right now. So confused.
I think that was the first great Twitter war, though, because that went on for ages.
I pulled it, yeah, I just started mocking him on Twitter. And either way, it was a thrill.
Patrick and I spent literally minutes preparing for this talk tonight. And I'm realizing now there are so many great questions that I could have asked, because they're all in here in this iPad. I'll start with Mr. Carney. Every landlord in Highland Square claims that you lived in their apartment complex to their potential renters. Can you please tell me if any of them are telling the truth?
I moved back to the Devo obsession. I moved into Devo's apartment, 103 South Portage Path, apartment 4, and I lived there for a while.
You two, you and I are probably the only two people who were starstruck by that address.
I was actually
that's Devo. That was Devo's. That was Devo headquarters. That's what they called it. But you lived there.
I lived there. And I lived below some people that were doing something called speed. And it was really awful. But the woman below me, Fran, I think is her name, still lives there. She's the sweetest lady. And I was there. I felt like I was doing a public service by buffering the people skateboarding at 4 in the morning above me.
I think I know the answer to this. Swenson's? Or Sky?
I'm gonna say this. They're both the Akron places, and I'm all Swenson's, but I'm on the Sky High, all about Sky High. Underrated. You guys kind of hate me for that right now, but trust me, it kicks the guy with his butt, in my opinion.
But I thought you were going to say Hamburger Station.
I love Hamburger Station too. That's for a whole different thing.
Well, tell the story, because the Black Keys actually created a hamburger for a national. It was
actually, so there's a restaurant in Southern California called Umami Burger, and it's a high-end burger place where the burgers are $15. Anyway, they came to us and they said, would you guys want to curate a burger and we'll put an extra $1 on it and we'll give it to the charity of your choice, which of course is the Akron charity that we always contribute to. So we designed one and we decided, the Akron burger is like, it's American cheese, lettuce, or American cheese, onions, pickle, mustard. And I actually, a friend of mine, who I'm close with, started tweeting at me about how I was an a-hole for stealing Smokeson's recipe. I mean, honestly, if I just put ketchup and mayonnaise on it, isn't that Burger King's recipe? But yeah, I do love, there's a lot of good burgers in this town. Louis is really good. Larry's is really good. But yeah, I have a special place for Hamburger Station. My dad used to take me to one on South Main, back when there were still porno theaters down there.
So here's
I think adult cinema, I'm sorry. Like downtown Akron, adult cinema. I don't know, maybe they don't show that kind of movie there. Maybe it's just like C-SPAN.
Do you remember the adult bookstore downtown? That was right next to the Lion Spider, where you guys, it was Mr. Bill was then, but.
Yeah.
My favorite story about that is when I was a columnist at the Beacon, and I had one of those days where I just had nothing. It was December, and I had nothing to write about, and I just went for a walk downtown to try to find something. And I walked past the adult bookstore, and I'm thinking nostalgically about when I used to see the department store windows decorated for Christmas with figures in the window, and they're all shuttered and shut down. And I walked past the adult bookstore, and they've got, unironically, they've got blow up, snowmen and a Santa Claus, blow up owls in the window, but they're just this wholesome Christmas scene. And well, I guess I've got a column today.
You know what? At least we still have the Highland Shoe Repair going on. Honestly, I have to say, it is amazing. Today, my dad and I are driving around the city, like he said, and it is every single time. I haven't lived here for 7 years, so I come back a couple times a year, and every time I come back, I'm impressed at just how much different the city is from when I was a kid. It's amazing. Because it was a miracle when the Civic Theater was open as a kid. It was like an event, Rocky and Bullwinkle would play. Now there's stuff happening down there all the time. It's pretty cool. And the downtown Akron, I think it's still business just moved, so.
Yeah, somebody should reopen that as a legit business. Sort of springing from that, do you think the rest of America has any idea of the richness Akron has to offer? And if not, what can we do to help them get a clue?
Ann and I have had the privilege of traveling around the world, and especially the United States. And every town has something worthwhile, And I think, if you're talking to someone from LA, their take on Akron is the same. That you mentioned any city, whether it's Grand Rapids, Detroit, Akron, Cleveland, it's all the same to them. And, for me, I can tell that there's very distinct places. There's very, I know that Cleveland is a hot dog town, and Akron is a burger town. In LA, just hot dog towns probably. But yeah, I don't think that most people would know all the cool things about Akron. I think that it's the Akronite's job to educate.
Semi-related. You and Dan both have given a lot back to Akron, particularly through the Black Keys Alfred McMoore Endowment Fund at the Akron Community Foundation. If you don't know what this is, tell them who Alfred McMoore was, how he plays into the legacy, and what that means to you in terms of.
Yeah, the name our name or band comes from a man named Alfred McMoore who was taken care by that same foundation, and he had schizophrenia, and he was an artist, and he became friends with Dan's father, and he would make these 5-foot wide scrolls, and they're 50 feet long, and he would draw really, really interesting, very bizarre stuff on it, and Dan's dad became obsessed with him, introduced my dad to Alfred, and my dad wrote a big article about Alfred for the Akron Beacon Journal, and Alfred got my dad's phone number, and he got Dan's dad's phone number, and he used to call our houses incessantly and leave really funny, crazy messages. He was the sweetest guy ever, but half the time didn't make any sense. And if he always wanted crayons and pencils and paper and Diet Coke and pipe tobacco. And he would say, Jim Carney, I need this, I need this, and this. If you don't do this, you're D flat. You're D flat. You're a black key. So he thought that the black keys on the piano were super distant, and therefore, it was an insult. I'll submit that. So that's where I think it's wrong.
So, but you've done concerts, and when you won the Cleveland Arts Prize a few years ago, you donated your prize money all to this foundation. So people say, do artists give back to their communities? Black Keys truly have done that, and not for notoriety or anything, but by the same token, like you played, as I did, wobble baseball really badly. But Black Keys designed a T-shirt that was a wobble uniform shirt, but it was a Black Keys shirt that you sold to raise money also for the foundation.
Yeah, my brother
that was for wobble.
Yeah, no, it's for wobble. My brother designed Black Keys. Well, we decided. My friend Steve Mokovich, who's one of my best friend growing up, older brother, was coaching the team and asked us to sponsor the team. We sponsored the team, and my brother Michael was like, "That's the ugliest T-shirt I've ever seen. I'm gonna design it." So he redesigned the wobble logo, and we sold it on our website. And I think we made something like $39,000 for wobble. Which is cool. I really had fun playing baseball. A couple of coaches' parents, though.
I was so bad. My dad was the coach. That was the only year I played. And the only thing I remember was being in the outfield, and I would throw my glove in the air and catch it idly, like no idea what was going on. And one day the glove went up and down, the baseball came down with it, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I guess we could just, I'm going to kind of distill the rest of the questions into one final question, because people want to know what's next. So where are the Black Keys now, and what's going to happen next with that?
So yeah, we formed the band 15 years ago last month, and we played our last show for a while, August of last year, and we both had just been. We basically have been traveling, because when you do a tour, you can only do like 4 or 5 shows a week, but then you gotta fly to the show and fly home. But so if you do like 90 shows in a year, say, you can be traveling with press and everything 160, 180 days. So we basically had just spent over half of our lives for the last 6 years not at home, and I think we both started losing our minds. So we decided that Dan was gonna do this side project, the arts, and tour it minimally, and we were just gonna try to chill out a little bit on it. And so we took last year off, and we're gonna not tour next year, but we're gonna make a record. So